It's like the drum beat to Ballroom Blitz.
No, I think Billy Cobham was the session musician for this record.
You're kidding, right?
Yes, I'm joking. The most intricate drum beat of all time. For making your mind up.
Come on, Morris, sing along.
I haven't heard this song in 40 years, and there's a reason why I haven't heard it in 40 years. Say the rap. For making your mind up. Don't let your inhibition.
Come on, you know the bridge.
Take you by your hand.
Pure class.
And let others change your mind.
Key change is required for all Eurovision entries.
One of the greatest pieces of music ever written. For making your mind up. Oh, and they had Jimmy Page as the session musician playing guitar on this as well. So
clearly,
just the best. Yeah.
That's, I think, the second key change. Come on, Morris. Sing it. You know these words.
For making your mind up.
Morris is about as good as actually the singers on the song.
I am better than them. I turned down the part in Bucks Fizz. I couldn't do the dance moves.
That I don't believe. Perky, right?
Superb. I tell you, the standard at the Eurovision that year must have been really bad if this was the winner.
Come on, bring us home, Morris. Come on.
Slow it down.
Lean in. Don't leave anything on the stage.
For making your mind up. Making your mind up. For making your mind up. Amazing.
Yes, bravo.
Amazing. Oh, I mean, just
Thank you.
Superb. Thank you for reminding me of that song, because I really, like I said, I hadn't heard it in, what year did it win? Like 78 or I don't know, like a long time
Yes,
ago.
no, 80.
80, sorry, 1980. It was...
Well, what song is that, Morris? Why don't you tell us what song that is?
What, it's called Making Your Mind Up by Bucks Fizz.
And how did it enter your life?
Oh, it won the Eurovision Song Contest. But before it won the Eurovision Song Contest, we had to sit through a song for Europe, which was where the best of British talent would compete in the Eurovision Song Contest. So if that was the winning song, you can imagine what the other material was like. So I don't actually remember. But yeah, and that was a number one record. Little known fact about Bucks Fizz, but Mark Ronson's father was their manager.
Wow.
Yeah.
You'd think they would have funkier beats.
Mark was very, very young when that came out, so I don't think he had any part in the making of that song. But there were some dance moves that came out of it, if I remember correctly. You know, the Brotherhood of Man, who had won, I think, in maybe 78 or 77, with...
Save Your Kisses for Me.
Save All Your Kisses for Me, which really, I mean, if we thought Make Your Mind Up was bad, Save Your Kisses for Me was even worse.
So welcome to Disinfect, where we air out music's worst songs. You might tell that we're already in process. We're airing out one of the worst songs, Bucks Fizz, Making Your Mind Up. And we've got that song going, not only to bring back primal, terrifying memories for Morris as a young child in England, forced to watch Eurovision.
No, wasn't forced to watch it. I watched it voluntarily because there was nothing else on television. Okay. Yes,
Sure.
I watched it. I volunteered.
In any event, this is a special edition of Disinfect, where it's a Eurovision-centric edition, where we're going to analyze the worst Eurovision winners in the contest's history.
So it must be a multi-series show then, because I think like how many editions are we doing? There's just one.
What I would like you to do, Morris, is sort of, if you could just tell us what Eurovision is from, your traumatized perspective. How did it enter your life?
Eurovision actually was a song contest that was taken extremely seriously. I mean, I don't know the exact history, but I think it started in the 1950s.
1956.
Okay, great.
Based on a Italian festival called the Sanremo Festival.
Got it.
However, the first edition was in Switzerland, and the entire event was intended as a pan-European summit for popular music in the post-war era.
Right. So it was kind of bringing Europe back together again. So a way of unifying. You had the European Union, but not all the countries who participated in the Eurovision Song Contest were members of the European Union. So this was just another way of bringing them in. And then you had sort of outliers as well. Turkey would be involved and Israel would be involved as well. Both of those.
Basically, if you could afford to host the Eurovision event, then you suddenly were somehow part of the European Union for that.
I don't think anyone
night.
could really afford it back then, to be honest with you, except for Switzerland. And that's why they did the first one. But yeah, so it was a big deal. It was a lot of national pride was involved.
What you're saying is every European country fielded its own entry.
Yes.
And each one was a pop song, sort of to show how hip each country was, essentially, and to bring together the entire European community with song.
Well, music being a uniter, basically, which is what music's always done. And this event would happen where everybody would come, and you would have the countries would be the judges, and they would vote on it. So it was something that you had the judges from each country, and they would vote on the best song. So you would have in each country beforehand the preliminary rounds to find the actual winner. And then that winner would then enter into the song contest. And you would
it's like the World Cup.
It's the World Cup of music. And you would get some...
Except for none of the teams are good.
Well, this is not actually true, because you did get well-known artists entering it. For example, Cliff Richard. When Cliff Richard entered it in, I think, 1973 with Power to All My Friends, he was already had been a superstar in England for at least over a decade. Lulu was already famous. Sandy Shaw, who I think was the first British winner with Puppet on a String, 1967, she was an up-and-coming pop star. Dana, who had, I think it was All Kinds of Everything, 1970. This is all from memory, by the way, guys. I am just remembering this from my traumatized youth. She was not as well known. And then, of course, the biggest, I'd say the most famous artist to win the Eurovision Song Contest was ABBA. And I think they were already known in Sweden when they won. We'd never heard of them. 1974 they won. And
so Eurovision brought ABBA to the world, essentially. But then what was funny was ABBA won, and it propelled them to superstardom, and still nobody outside of Europe had ever heard of Eurovision. It was like a one-time event, like a volcano erupting.
And unfortunately, with the success of ABBA, I think the following year, or maybe the year after, Holland entered their version of ABBA, and they won with the song Ding Dang Dong.
When was the first time that Eurovision entered your life as a sentient being?
Sandy Shaw, Puppet on a String, 1967. Although I don't remember her winning it, but the song was played constantly on the radio for a good few years after that, because that was the winner. That was the one that had won for us. So it was a big deal. And of course, every Eurovision Song Contest I saw, when I started watching it, would mention it. And also, just as a side note, my dad actually worked with Sandy Shaw's then husband. So that's how I knew about her as well. And she wore no shoes. That was it.
So we played a little Bucks Fizz. And when that came out, how cool was Bucks Fizz if you were like a really discerning music listener, what did Bucks Fizz mean to you?
Well, I think you've got to know what a Bucks Fizz is. Bucks Fizz is the name of a drink, which is the drink that sort of like Sharon's order when they go to a club. Have a Bucks Fizz, please. So it's like champagne and orange juice. I don't know, but the type of drink it was kind of is a good analogy.
Epitomize what kind of song it was?
It epitomizes the song and the group. And at that time, there were a lot of those types of groups. There was a band called Dollar,
right,
which were a male and female duo. But this sort of chirpy,
perky
band. I mean, I'm pretty sure Bucks Fizz won one of the sort of entertainment shows that we used to have in England, like something like You're a Star or Opportunity Knocks. And it's good that you guys never saw any of those shows, because they really were bad. But of course, we only had 3 channels when I was growing up in England. So half the country were riveted to one of these terrible shows that we had to watch.
So extrapolating from ABBA's success in Eurovision, when Bucks Fizz won Eurovision, I feel like Bucks Fizz for Anglophiles became sort of like a default reference for the cheesiest, most industrially made crap pop music, shamelessly going for chart position, manufactured junk.
Yes.
Would you say that was accurate?
I think that is a very accurate thing. Yes, very, very accurate. Yes.
By the way, I'd like to point out we've been focusing on covers here at Disinfect. Yes. And in fact, the songs that you hear on Eurovision are in fact covers. The person singing often is not the songwriter. I'd
Correct.
say 99%.
Correct.
The person singing is never the songwriter. They're actually covering a song that basically the country that submitted the songs brings together its top songwriting popsmiths to create the ultimate 3-minute heat-seeking pop music missile.
Yes.
Now, the problem here is that Estonia has no top pop music songsmiths.
I did not know that.
Well, I mean, name them. Name the top producers from Azerbaijan.
Are they even in Eurovision?
Yes.
They must be recent additions.
So essentially these are manufactured songs designed to appeal to the widest possible audience, even audiences that do not speak the language of the country, which often results in very badly sung English lyrics.
Yeah.
Where the singer clearly does not understand what they're singing about.
Can I just add something that about that song that was famous about it that we aren't able to actually see because we're just listening to the music. But I think the thing that actually won them the Eurovision Song Contest was towards the end of the song, one of the girls does a twirl and they rip her skirt off. And
this is true.
That was the moment. I think it was, I don't know, Cheryl Baker or something was the girl. But that was the moment. I think that was the wow moment. I think every act needs that sort of wow factor. Brotherhood of Man had that little stupid dance for Save Your Kisses for Me, and Bucks Fizz had that ripping the skirt moment. And we looked forward to it every time they performed the song.
It was kind of like almost like an intentional wardrobe malfunction.
Correct. No, but it was definitely part of the act.
So
just stick with Bucks Fizz for a little bit, because
the show is only going to be about Bucks Fizz.
Okay, unfortunately, they then had other songs. They then thought they were good, and the other songs were terrible. So I just want to very quickly just say, The Land of Make Believe, and The Camera Never Lies were just even worse than Make Your Mind Up.
Bucks Fizz Greatest Hits. It was in the glove compartment of every Opel in England.
Cortina. Ford Cortina.
Yes, exactly.
with the fuzzy dice.
On cassette.
With the furry dice, yes.
Yes. If you wanted to alienate your date, you put in the Bucks Fizz cassette in your Cortina. Pure class. So how has Eurovision evolved? Has it become great? How have we seen it? How have we seen Eurovision evolve since those heady days?
Well, I think it's expanded the countries that participate in it. So you have, as you were saying, Azerbaijan. I did not know. I haven't watched Eurovision for many, many years, which is okay for me. I mean, my life has gone on and I've lived a fruitful and good life without it being a part of it. So, but it's definitely expanded. And, I thought that the movie on Netflix with Will Ferrell, which I thought was superb. I absolutely loved it.
So what Morris is referring to is there's actually a movie called Eurovision on Netflix starring Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams, and it's a story of Iceland trying to lose the Eurovision contest because they can't afford to host it. So they find the absolute worst act they can find, which turns out to actually win, of course, which is actually based on a little bit of Eurovision history that we get into in the main episode.
Right.
So with the Eurovision movie appearing on Netflix, starring a big American star, you'd think that people in America had actually heard of Eurovision, the phenomenon, and in fact, they have not. But Eurovision, when it's broadcast, I think it reaches hundreds of millions of viewers in countries all over the world. It's actually one of the biggest annual events of its kind. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing. I believe there's almost 60 entries, all of which I watched and listened to for this episode, I might add.
Oh, God. Man.
Almost none of them are good.
Thank you for doing that on my behalf, because I wouldn't have done that.
I did it for science.
Yeah.
So anyway, because Morris has been self-isolating from Eurovision now for at least a decade or two. Three decades of zero Eurovision. We figured we'd go to the source and really get some experts on Eurovision to speak to us, but experts that have enough American snark to sort of put it into perspective. So this year, Eurovision is taking place in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. It was supposed to take place in Rotterdam last year, but the pandemic happened. And so they had to put off the year entirely. The previous year, Holland had won, so that gave them the right to host the event, which always gives things a little bit of a boost. Again, it's like the World Cup. It's like, what's the host country for the World Cup? Essentially, that's the kind of anticipation Eurovision engenders. So in order to really have people speaking from the ground, we approached two people who actually live in the Netherlands, who are experiencing Eurovision mania as we speak. Their names are Greg Shapiro and Rob AndristPlourde. I know Greg and Rob from a very famous comedy theater called Boom Chicago in Amsterdam. They're both Americans who went to Boom Chicago to do improv comedy in the style of like Second City and the Groundlings. And while they were there, they became some of the best known comedians in the Netherlands, at least American ones. I know that's like Jumbo Shrimp. Anyway, these guys have been watching Eurovision now for decades, but they came to it as aliens. And so they're really the ones to give us the take from the streets on the awe-inspiring anticipation for this year's Eurovision. And they put it into perspective as only snarky Americans can. So without further ado, Disinfect goes to Eurovision. Oh, we're here with Disinfect. A lot of people don't know that Disinfect actually has a chapter in the Netherlands. And now you are being exposed to the wing of Disinfect that lives in Amsterdam, Holland. There's a reason why I chose our guest today. It's because they actually live in Europe. They know what Eurovision is. However, they are also American, which means they are not blinded by the geopolitical morass and fromage and ethnic instruments that often accompany Eurovision entries. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guests today. Going in alphabetical order, we have Rob AndristPlourde. Rob, say hello, Rob.
Hello, Matt Deal. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, it's an honor just being nominated. Yes, I do let guests talk occasionally. Rob AndristPlourde has been a supporter of Disinfect since the beginning. He's actually one of those guys. Like if you have a podcast, you needle your friends to listen to your podcast. And Rob is actually one of the friends that actually listens.
I've been a purveyor of all podcasts since way back in the early 2000s. And most podcasts come and go, but it feels like Disinfect, it's got some gravitas. It's got a foundation. It's got you as an uber fan and academic of music. So with your partner in the Disinfect, I choose you.
Well, thank you, Rob. So giving a little background on Rob. Rob is a comedian originally from Boston, Massachusetts. He moved to Amsterdam, Holland, the Netherlands, many decades ago to perform with a theater company called Boom Chicago, where he was a mentor and performed with Seth Meyers, Jordan Peele, Jason Sudeikis, lots of other famous people. But he's here today because he truly understands music. He's had a long-running show called Legends of Rob, which if he wasn't such a narcissist, he would call Legends of Rock, where he actually discusses musical history while making you laugh. Thank you, Rob, for coming and being on Disinfect.
It's nice to be here, Matt.
Did I leave anything out in your illustrious biography? Oh, yes, I did.
Oh.
I did. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Rob is probably best known in the United States for his appearance in Harold and Kumar Escape from Guantanamo Bay, where he played random Amsterdam stoner.
Yes.
He has also been a hooligan in the red light district in the film Snapshots and an American tourist in the film Sint. Yes.
Yes, that is all true.
So with us today as well is another friend from the Netherlands, Greg Shapiro. Greg is a luminary in the Netherlands. He's known as the American guy in the Netherlands to Dutch people. Would you say that's accurate, Rob?
I would even go as far as to say that Greg would be called like the American Nederlander.
Yes. So that means he's basically gone native.
Yes.
Yes. Greg and I grew up together, actually. We spent many a ridiculous time together before he became an international comedian.
Yes.
And so Greg also moved to the Netherlands many decades ago to perform with Boom Chicago. And he's since gone on to write many books about the experience of living in Amsterdam, many of them funny. The ones that are not, we won't discuss. Give me some of the titles of those books, Greg.
Right. Well, since I got my Dutch passport, as well as my American passport, I wrote How to Be Orange, How to Be Dutch, the quiz, and The American Netherlander, 25 Years of Expat Tales.
So, by the way, if you live in Holland, you often see Greg. He'll be in some random commercial where he's the wacky American guy. He'll be some guy on TV where he's the wacky American guy. And he too has been cast in a series of illustrious movies. He starred with Naomi Watts in the film. What's it called? What's that film called?
Down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Her career went up. Greg's. The metaphor is there. Yes. Just kidding.
Zing.
Zing.
I helped her. I helped Naomi Watts with her American accent, though.
So anyway, these two have been stereotyped for a long time as the Americans. The Americans in Europe, like whenever they need the American take, they go. They can only go to two people, which are Rob AndristPlourde and Greg Shapiro. And I would say, actually, you guys are uniquely chosen for this particular episode because you've had decades of immersion in European culture, and you've actually been exposed to Eurovision as natives. I think I probably was initially exposed to Eurovision from you guys or some of the other expats in Amsterdam. Tell me a little bit of your experience of Eurovision, and sort of explain the show and how you discovered it.
When I first moved to the Netherlands in Europe in 1996, about 2 months into us arriving in about April and May, there was a contest that we saw on television called the Eurovision Song Contest. And before that, all I knew about Eurovision was that ABBA was the band that won it and got their claim to fame. And also kind of the last band to make it huge by winning the Eurovision Song Contest.
So Rob brings up an interesting point, which is pretty much the only way that Americans have heard of Eurovision is because of ABBA. ABBA created what's probably the Citizen Kane of Eurovision songs, which is Waterloo. And it was their breakout hit. 1975, I think. Is that right? 1974. And despite this incredible international launch, Americans and other countries have no fucking idea what Eurovision is. So go on, continue. Sorry.
And you're not wrong. How America has the World Series, that's only America and parts of Canada. Eurovision is Europe, the Middle East, parts of Africa, and Australia. And hell, Russia thrown in there as well. They can compete
Eastern Europe, all over the place. Mm-hmm. If you've ever wondered what pop music trends are in Belarus, there's Eurovision.
And after watching the first, you understand how campy it can be. And you really lean into the mass appeal of fabulously low-hanging fruit. That's what Eurovision is.
Greg, do you want to tell us your journey with Eurovision?
So, I moved to the Netherlands right around the same time as Rob, and my intro to Eurovision, and again, I had the same basic knowledge, ABBA, I guess it's a thing they still do. Let's see, I married a Dutch woman, and her cousin is Floor de Goede, who is a cartoonist and a member of the homosexual community,
which is significant in Eurovision culture.
So I believe he invited me to this Eurovision viewing party, and he said, "You cannot miss this." And he, said it's kind of a gay thing for us, but it's so incredible. We can't just consider this a gay thing. Like you have to come if you want to be European. You have to come. You have to be a little gay in this. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe I was there to represent the hetero numbers or something to keep it inclusive. But indeed, that was a sort of context. Rob used the term camp, and they were Dutch, but they were not watching the Dutch broadcast. They were watching Graham Norton on BBC
commenting,
who's the most catty comment.
Yes.
That is Eurovision to me, not just, the campy costumes and the sappy songs, but the just scathing commentary from ironic Irishmen.
Going back to what Greg was saying about opening up the community of viewers in the Eurovision community, you don't have to be flamboyantly homosexual to enjoy Eurovision, but you can pretend to be for the contest. Camp is universal if you let it. It's absolutely and positively supporting ideas. And that's one criteria amongst many that I look for in a good performance at Eurovision. Camp is up there.
I got the sense when I visiting you guys in Amsterdam, watching Eurovision, that in the same way that Halloween has been sort of a get out of jail free card for women to dress in their most risque fantasy outfits, I think Eurovision sort of opens the door for everybody to be a little bit gay when they're watching it and embrace kitsch and embrace their, it's a time for acceptance and flamboyance, except when it's not about acceptance and flamboyance.
About the cultural significance, it's true. I was introduced to Eurovision as a gay thing, and then let's expand this for everybody. I think it has become that, actually. And there's even a film now on Netflix or whatever with Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams. It's just called Eurovision, I think.
Yeah. Have you seen it?
I have. It's
a masterpiece.
Enjoyable. But I mean, if you follow those main characters, and this is, Americans who are, trying to understand this phenomenon of Eurovision, I assume not just the characters, but like the actual screenwriters and producers, there's a certain, there's that flamboyant, there's the gay culture kind of element, but I think the main characters are very much just letting out their inner nerd.
Yes.
And that, to me, is more what Eurovision has become, actually.
So you're saying it's a place where the outsiders can come inside?
I think so, yeah.
I'm getting skeptical looks from my European brothers here.
I wouldn't disagree with you, Matt. I would absolutely agree with you. In past years, transsexuals have won Eurovision, from Israel with Dana International, with Diva, the song that won from Israel, and then Conchita Wurst from Austria, who won.
Yes, Austria, easily the friendliest country to gays in the world. Not.
Exactly. And yet, she won.
By the way, Conchita Wurst, what was her song? Was
Rise Like a Phoenix.
What's the Conchita?
Rise Like a Phoenix.
Rise Like the Phoenix. Conchita Wurst's performance of Rise Like the Phoenix is maybe one of the greatest performances of anything ever in history. Okay? We're here to sort of talk about the worst Eurovision winners, but Conchita Wurst is not the worst. Unfortunately, comedians here are like, dude, don't go there. No, but it really was kind of moving to see a trans person with a beard singing a 2019 version of "I Will Survive," invested with emotion and passion and personal experience.
And original. Yeah, there was a kind of a knockoff version of that same concept a couple years later from, I believe, France, and it just died.
It just didn't work. There's only one Conchita Wurst.
Yeah.
If you're going to be the best, be Conchita Wurst. This is why they're comedians and I'm the podcast guy.
Oh, but Dan Stevens in the movie Eurovision, oh my God, as the Russian character, just nailed it.
I think he deserved an Academy Award for that. I mean, it's one of the greatest performances ever.
No, what do you mean? I like women.
It's hard to make a comedy about Eurovision because the original shit is just so funny. The thin line of satire, it's already there. So the movie Eurovision is a masterpiece, but from a comedic standpoint, making something funny that's already funny.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Matt Deal, we had to make fun of Donald Trump, for 4 years for an international audience. They got it. And not like in America where it was like, please stop. But in Europe, it was like, oh my God, can you believe this guy? And at some point, I would do the voice. Okay. And, people would say like, oh my God, how did you think of that crazy joke? And I would say, I'm just reading the words.
Read the words. Transcription.
Just the transcript with the voice, and then you don't want to do too much.
So we've been in a lot of places with Eurovision right now. What are some other key things about Eurovision that someone in the United States would not understand?
I was talking briefly about the geopolitical aspect, and there are countries that have not competed before. So when I started getting into Eurovision, that was right around the time of, mid 90s. that was the time of their pretty big civil war on the continent in Yugoslavia. And just in preparing for this podcast, I went back through the Wikipedia, some of the history, and I think it was like 1989 that Yugoslavia won Eurovision with a completely forgettable number called Rock Me Baby. But that was the
Never has there been a pop song called Rock Me Baby, ever.
But I mean, that was the last time that Yugoslavia was an entry, I think, in any global competition. By 92, 93, there was civil war. 95, there were, atrocities. And then you started getting the independent countries of the former Yugoslavia, entering Eurovision. And I think, what was it, like 2006 or 7 that Serbia won? That, was a moment, really, not politically necessarily, but like culturally, holy moly. And in the voting, all the like neighboring countries or the sympathetic countries, like the pro-Russia or former Soviet Republic, countries that are friendly to Serbia. And that very much plays a role in the voting and in which country gets to host it the following year.
Kind of like when you're watching the World Series and you have the National League and the American League and your team doesn't get in, you always root for the team who beat your team. And I feel like that's what Eurovision will be. If your country doesn't fare too well, then all your neighbors are going to support you. Eurovision isn't so much a political, we're voting for you because you suffered all of these atrocities. It's Eurovision has a rule that no politics can be played whatsoever. You can't have political slogans on your shirt or your costumes. There was an incident in 2019 where Madonna's dancers, as they left the stage, revealed a Palestinian and Israeli flag as they left. And she was fined for that. It's in the rule book, support your country, but no political statements.
Although what's interesting is, I forget what year it won, but Jalala, 1944.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
From Ukraine.
From the Ukraine. I forced myself to listen to all, not just listen, watch. I forced myself to watch every Eurovision winner in preparation for this podcast. But anyway, what I did was I sort of made notes of like what songs were actually good. And the Jalala song, I was like, wow, this is like a real song. This is like a normal song. And it was like, I don't know if you've heard, how well you know the song. What year did that come out? I have it somewhere.
Was it 2016? It was right after Russia invaded the Crimea and got away with it. And Ukraine sang this song of woe and tragedy.
So the song 1944 is this like incredible, it's not even it's like a soulful European dance song. It was very current to the pop music aesthetic of the moment it came out in, which is very unique for Eurovision, because Eurovision is always like, Alanis Morissette will come out in 1995, and then like 2001, someone sounds like Alanis Morissette on Eurovision.
Oh my God. The winners from, what was it? The winners from like Portugal came in with a song called Everybody that was and that was, it was like, come on everybody, do that conga. From Estonia in like 1999. Yeah.
So the Miami Sound Machine got bogarted. There's a lot of that. But anyway, so this Jalala song, it actually has kind of like a two-step beat. There's like kind of, that kind of came back, that kind of like UK garage, Aluna George, there's this kind of, it was a very Au Courant song. And then what is it about? It is about the oppression of the Crimean Tatar population and oppression, and how that oppression began and continues on, and we must never forget. So that is a light, non-political Eurovision song that created.
Do you know what it is? It's pure nationalism. it's victimhood. I mean, if Slobodan Milosevic was trotting out this same song, everybody would say, cut it out. Not cool. But since Ukraine was clearly the victim at that point, in 2008, when Russia invaded Georgia, I believe Georgia came out with a song. It didn't win, but I think their entry for Eurovision that year was "We Don't Want to Put In."
We don't want to put in.
We don't want to put in.
Wow.
And I think that song got cut because it was a little too on the nose.
Yeah, and in 2008, Russia definitely won.
Yeah. So, but they had to give one to Russia so that they didn't have an international incident.
We were asked to come up with our favorite, worst Eurovision songs, and the one I picked was the winner of 2008, and it was the Russian submission from a gentleman by the
Dima.
Yes, Dima Bilan, with a song called "Believe." It's a typical Eurovision style song, but he makes the key mistake of taking it too seriously. Like, there's a couple of criteria with every Eurovision song that you got to abide by. And if you go over the recipe just a little, it's just going to lose it, at least for me. Now, Russia won that year. And, this is not the first election Russia rigged. It started even way back then, I would say. So having a political statement, you can possibly get away with it if you do it really subtly, but there is no outright political activism allowed to be demonstrated while the show is going on. Just like on Saturday Night Live, Lauren frowns on improvisation. Eurovision frowns on activism, political activism of any kind.
But then it's covertly done all over the place.
Covertly, if you can get away with it, good for you. Madonna did not. Also, her performance, awful.
Before we hear Dima Bilan's masterpiece of Eurovision from fromage, I don't know what the Russian word for cheese is. I think we have to point out, Rob brought up some very good points, which are there are some rules to Eurovision. They're broken a lot, but there are some rules, which are song must be 3 minutes long. You have to be, I think, 16 years old to compete. And the reason that is there was a 13-year-old, Sandra Kim from France.
Oh, yeah.
And it's literally it's like she blows Whitney Houston out of the water. It is one of the greatest performances I've ever seen. But she's like 13. And she's, yeah. So they changed that. And no political anything. Oh, well. And I guess those are the rules. And they try to violate them in every way possible. What are you going to say, Rob? Sorry.
I was just going to tack on my criteria for a good Eurovision song, which includes, a full balance of energy, spectacle, camp, and vocal ability, which is not really an issue. So, singing capability is kind of last. Language skill, not really important. There was a contestant that yodeled. You can yodel if you want to. So there are criteria that are make or break deal breakers for me, being how much energy you bring, your spectacle behind you, the amount of camp that you have, if you can sing, and your language skill. Hats off to you if you're trying to do it in a language that's not yours, also known as English.
Yes, the abuses of English in Eurovision are amazing. And also the shoehorning of awkward languages into popular culture formats that don't take them.
Yes.
Disturbing. By the way, I want to get into Dima's performance of Believe right away. However, what I recommend for the faithful listeners of Disinfect, if you want to get the most out of this episode, I recommend you pause, watch the video of the performance on YouTube, and then come back and listen to our analysis. Because I think, to Rob's point, Eurovision is as visual as it is oral. So let's listen to Dima Bilan, Believe.
Even when the thunder and storm beneath,
I can't quite place what song he's stealing from here.
He's trying to steal from all of them, actually. I mean, look at the guy's energy. He can't decide whether to sell the song or how he looks while selling the song. And you can totally hear that.
Kind of a sub Backstreet Boys, underfed Bieber vibe.
Yeah, back when the boy bands went solo.
I'm thinking again, geopolitics. This came the year after Belgrade won from Serbia, right? So this was being performed in Serbia, I believe. Yeah, I believe. So when you just start singing and you hear the crowd go, whoa, you can tell that Russia is just the favorite of this Serbian crowd.
Yeah, the spectacle here, if you're listening and you can't see this, what you've got are 3 white guys wearing white shirts who have a huge stage fit for like Rammstein. But instead, it's all wasted on 2 backup singers, unlit in the shadows, and 3 guys in white button-down untucked shirts. These untucked shirts...
By the way, Rob is actually missing something key, which is important to the Russian national identity. One of the 3 performers on stage is a ice dancer.
He's not an ice dancer. He is a Russian Olympic gold medalist and 3-time world champion in figure skating, Ivanji Plushenko. And the guy playing violin, Edvin Martin, he is a violinist to the skating world. That's no lie. That's his title. Violinist to the skating world. And a thing about this is that it was well documented that Martin played a real Stradivarius on stage. That was the draw. Fancy product placement. A real Stradivarius with an additional draw of the spectacle. It's like, we're serious here. This is a real instrument. I mean, the show is mostly lip sync, so this gesture of this antique violin is pretty basic. It's like, ladies and gentlemen, for your entertainment, Celine Dion featuring James Cameron's Oscar. Ugh.
Wow.
And yeah, it just ends. I mean, the third guy is obviously Dima Bilan. And the thing is, he's taking all of Eurovision far too seriously. There is no fun in his eyes. His overcommitted passion effectively sucks out the fun and just canceled the camp.
I think it's funny. There's the podcast Wind of Change. Did you guys listen to that?
The Scorpions one?
So essentially there's a podcast called Wind of Change that explores the notion that the Scorpions song Wind of Change was actually created by the CIA to foment pro-democracy in previously non-democratic states, most of which were part of the United USSR. And it goes very in-depth, trying to prove that the CIA actually created the song Wind of Change to bring down the Berlin Wall. And the funny thing about Believe by Dima Bilan is it sort of tries to be like Wind of Change, this sort of like anthem of unity for, if we all just believe we can be together as this great, world. And it's coming from Russia, which of course is like, shattering and dividing and conquering nations, pitting people against each other. It's kind of like the perfect gaslighting Eurovision entry.
Don't forget, Russia won Eurovision in May of 2008, and in August of 2008, they invaded Georgia.
Voila.
Unity.
Yes. And again, now getting back, we didn't really get into it, but a lot of the voting is tied to how well you're getting along with your neighbor states.
Yeah, 100%. If you live in France, you're going to get the support maybe of Belgium and Luxembourg and Spain, but if you're Germany, you're not going to get the support from Portugal and Spain. No, not at all.
And then if you're if you're Estonia, suddenly you have Russia and Poland, and, So getting back to Dima Bilan's performance, another thing that we need that's hard to demonstrate in the podcast format is there's 2 performances for every winner in Eurovision. And so in other words, there's the performance where they win, and then the next year, the winner comes back and is the first song of the next year's Eurovision contest.
Here's how it works as far as I understand. The country that wins Eurovision gets to host the whole event the following year. Not only does the winning singer get to come back, outside of the competition and say, by the way, here's my new song, but the country that won automatically gets to perform, I think, in like the semifinals and the finals with a totally new singer, a totally new song. And ever since I've been watching, I don't think any country has won 2 years in a row. It used to happen way more, but
so famously, Ireland won 2 years in a row, and every time you win, you're the host city the next year.
Yeah,
right?
The host country.
And it's incredibly expensive to put on Eurovision for a host city and country. So Ireland won 2 years in a row, and they're like, yo, we can't afford to host another Eurovision. They tried to lose. They put on the most boring act they could. They tried to lose, and they won again 3 years in a row. And they're like, I think they were having like a terrible economic recession. They're like, we just can't do this.
Oh,
anymore.
that's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think I'd take a note of this, Matt. Ireland won in 1992, I think, with a song called Why Me, which was this pathetic kind of, I know you love me, but why? Why me? Like, all right, I guess they won. And then the next year was someone named Neve who won again. And so that was when Ireland was saying, okay, we got to put a stop to this. And next up was these 2 old guys playing pianos, talking about...
What were their names?
I don't know. They were like rock and roll kids. Rock and roll
Kids. That's the name of the song. It's called Rock and Roll Kids. Go ahead.
This is what music used to be like when we were kids. And I guess that was Ireland's idea of a surefire loser. But it was like the producers. It was like springtime for Hitler.
No, Ireland was trying to lose, and they're like, okay, shit, we won twice in a row. What are we going to do? How do we lose? We're going to get 2 ancient Irish men. Their names were Paul Harrington and Charlie Mageddon, and they're going to do a song, a shamelessly nostalgic song called Rock and Roll Kids, about the great music they used to listen to. Now, this is interesting because there are some themes that sort of naturally rise up in Eurovision. One is we must bring peace and love to the world. That's often a theme of a Eurovision winner. And then there's it's only rock and roll kind of, there's a nostalgia of how it used to be better. That's a theme in Eurovision songs. Like, remember when we were young and it used to be better? And then there's the songs that are sung in some native language that you just completely cannot fucking understand what they're talking about.
That's true too.
Oh, and by the way, this is something I noticed going to Amsterdam, is like, if Turkey would win, then you would hear the Eurovision song in Turkish restaurants for like 5 years after every time you went to a Turkish restaurant.
Yeah.
Am I on to something there? Is that getting back to Dima Bilan? So what I was sort of getting at with that sort of like, the returning hero, the returning champion of Eurovision, the original performance of Dima Bilan's Believe was embarrassingly anemic. Like Rob was saying, it was 3 guys wearing slacks.
And untucked shirts.
Slacks, untucked shirts, a figure skater, and a guy with a violin. No staging. They clearly did not think they were going to win. There was no backing at all from the host country other than supplying a Stradivarius and an Olympic athlete. Thinking how other countries process pop music. Somehow a Stradivarius and an Olympic figure skater is going to bring pop music championship to Russia. So, but then the year after, when Russia is hosting Eurovision, Dima Bilan opens the show with Believe. and it is the most over-the-top production you have ever seen in your life. It is like over-the-top, incredibly homoerotic, but in denial of its homoeroticism. So in other words, there's this kind of thing where like, oh shit, we won. And then the next year they like ramp up the special effects and the production value. And it was like a do-over to show Russian supremacy.
To the winners go the spoils of victory.
Yes. What's amazing to me about a Demon Balan song is like getting back to like the musical aspect of it. Rob said it's like a boy band song, but sung by a solo singer.
And not the good one either.
Yeah. It's
not the Justin Timberlake.
No, it's the guy in the Backstreet Boys with the beard who you know has a terrible drug habit. What other significance for you, Rob, in choosing that song?
Because it stood out by not being stand-out worthy. He lacked energy. He tried to bring game, but I couldn't see the commitment in his eyes. What you were talking about, the spectacle. Eurovision is nothing if there's no spectacle. It's all about jib camera shots, lasers, pyro. This had nothing but a skating rink and $1 million violin.
Yeah, so they really showcased the song.
Yeah, this was a winning song, and I don't believe it deserved to win. It didn't have qualities or criteria that are important for a winning Eurovision song. There was no camp. I mean, they tried to camp, but it just looked like a bad TED Talk with his untucked shirt billowing in the backgrounds.
Rob has actually given TED Talks, so he knows of what he speaks.
I have.
As has Greg, I think.
But yes, we're TEDxers.
We have 2 TED Talk alums here, so they know what they're talking about when they talk about minimal TED Talk staging.
I wish there was more camp in it because Eurovision is all about the all-inclusiveness of camp. But Russia, being the nation of homophobes, stepped on that, sucked out the campness from the performance. And nothing about that song made it worthy of being won.
Although the second performance had a lot more camp. They weren't going to lose that time, and then the homoeroticism really came out. By the way, what's amazing about that second performance of Dima Bilan's Believe, the next year, Greg was talking about like Graham Norton's running commentary. And what's amazing is in the intro of the song, Dima Bilan keeps smashing through walls. He's running and he smashes through one wall. And then he smashes through another wall. And then he smashes through another wall. And then another wall. And then suddenly there are dancing girls everywhere and very handsome men touching their chests. So if you've ever been to Russia, the way that they show their might is by making multiples. So for example, in St. Petersburg, they copied Venice. See, we can make Venice too. And then when I was in Moscow, there were 2 copies of the Empire State Building. You have 1 Empire State Building. We have 2.
I had no idea.
So to have like 20 walls, the guy has to run through, you know what I mean? Like any other Eurovision contestant would have like 5. But he has to run through 20 because it's Russia. It was the foundation for the Eurovision movie, for Dan Andrews' character. It's like the guy who's clearly gay, who's not, I mean, by the way, I have no idea if Demon Balan is gay. I don't want to, I'm not trying to, get him killed in his mother country. But it was so homoerotic. It was not having a dialogue with its homoerotic aspect.
But the do-over aspect,
it refused to own it. Yeah, it was not owning the homoeroticism that is inherent in Eurovision. It's celebrated. It was repressed.
And then again, it was also the very bland, like peace and love, we will all be one nation kind of terrible songwriting. Before we get to Greg's choice, I want to, I have 2 guys here from the Netherlands. Tell me about the Netherlands' relationship to Eurovision.
Yeah. So when I started watching Eurovision in the mid-1990s, Dutch people I was watching with were thinking about the last time the Netherlands won, which was like when the European Union was small and when Eurovision was small, when the competition wasn't that fierce, perhaps. But their idea of winning again was like, okay, we might not even qualify this year. And then they would play the game of like rooting for the spoiler or rooting for their the one they want to win, but not the one that they think they will win. Sometimes there are betting pools, like the European Cup or the World Cup. But yeah, mostly, certainly in 2019, when it came down to the Netherlands versus Sweden, everyone in the Netherlands was like, if it's Eurovision and you're up against Sweden, do not bet against Sweden. And then the fact that the Netherlands pulled it out at the last minute and won, beating Sweden, it was just it would be like the Netherlands versus Germany in the World Cup, and pulling out a last minute goal against Germany to win.
That's exactly what it was. What was that song, by the way? Do you remember?
Duncan Lawrence, Arcade. I've asked professional songwriters in the Netherlands, why was that song so special? And they all go, eh?
Well, by the way, I have to say, that song, Arcade by Duncan Lawrence, I think it's actually kind of a good song.
It's a good song, and the production values were deliberately stripped down. There's one guy and a piano and some lighting effects. And in that sense, that also qualifies for Eurovision. If you're deliberately stripped down and you're like, I have a song, this is the song, listen to the song, then yeah, that can work. I believe Sweden's production that year was an American transplant in Sweden who had a gospel background, and they had a whole big production and everything. And it was a good song. It was technically proficient, but again, yeah, was it the most Eurovision of songs? Maybe not.
You're bringing up two very interesting points, which are another classic European form is the power ballad, right? I mean, if we're going to break down what are the forms of Eurovision, there's the absolutely shameless folk ballad done in the style of the country's ancestors, right? There's the shameless dance pop hit that sounds like a dance pop hit from 10 years ago, overlaid with folk instruments from the ancestors of the country. There's a power ballad, like a very bad demo of a Justin Bieber song sung by somebody who's never actually spoken English or understands English. There's the song ruining, the days of old, and I miss the great rock and roll of the past, and also running through the forest in Bavaria with my shoes off. There's the clearly no holds barred homoerotic, like I Will Survive anthem sung by a LGBTQ icon of their country. What am I missing here? What am I missing?
Kind of pulled it all together in a very neat package of all of those kinds of songs, and just the way they're delivered. Everybody takes their heart out and they throw it right on the ground to demonstrate their passion for how they feel in under 3 minutes.
Yeah. And then the other phenomenon that, Greg, you brought up that was interesting is the ringer. The ringer is a fascinating phenomenon in Eurovision culture. So there's a song, it's called Everybody by Tanal Padar and Dave Benton. And it was the winner from Estonia a few years ago. And how many people from Estonia have a name like Dave Benton? How authentically Estonian is Dave Benton? Okay, he's a black guy that happens to live in Estonia. So, in other words, if you have an authentic American person who actually sang in church and knows how to sing, you roll that person out and you have them perform because they can actually sing in English.
Celine Dion in 1988 represented Switzerland. She's not Swiss. She was in...
Yes.
Yeah.
She's from Montreal.
She was in Dublin at the time.
Canadian.
And caught the ear of producers, and they said, would you please represent us in Switzerland? It's like, yeah, sure, why not? And won.
No rule against that.
So in other words, it's like in the case of Switzerland, they have performers perform for the country that they're eventually going to live in with all their millions. That's the tacit, I think she actually did move to Switzerland, Celine Dion.
Or at least hid some of her winnings in the secret bank account.
Yeah, which was probably a consolation prize from the Swiss government and that launched her career. That particular win. I mean, at least in small European countries you've never heard of.
It did, and ironically, if Celine Dion speaks French in Switzerland, they subtitle her.
Voila,
because she's French Canadian.
Things you learn. By the way, we might point out Switzerland was the host of the first ever Eurovision, and it also won that year. And it won with Celine Dion. And I think those are the only two wins of Switzerland, which is not a great shock considering Switzerland is not known as a huge exporter of the pop industrial complex. Oh, we got to go. Let's go on in the Netherlands. Do we have any more Netherlands? So take it, Rob.
Oh, okay. As far as the Netherlands competing within the Eurovision, what I know is they take it as serious as they would a World Cup or a Euro Cup, and will fund it as much as possible to place, and fund it even more to show, and to get as far as possible. The Dutch have used ringers in the past, like the Dutch pop singer Anouk from Rotterdam. And she competed in 2013 and did pretty well with a decent song. But she was a ringer of Dutch origin, just like Trintje Oosterhuis as well in the year afterwards of competing. And for almost 2 consecutive years, the Dutch contribution to Eurovision from 2016 to 2018 were all Western themed. They were country Western themed songs. The 2018 contribution from Wayland, it was called Outlaw in 'em.
So there was like a country Western fan that was the government liaison to Eurovision and just slotted in country Western music.
Yes.
Again, was it sung in Dutch or English? English, right?
The second one was in Dutch. The first one was in English. Yes.
Yeah. And again, if you know anything about the Dutch language, I would say it doesn't exactly lend itself to popular music in the most elegant way. What do you think?
It's pretty Germanic. It's good for opera, but for pop music, it's a little harsh on the ears, especially with the pronunciation of some words, like the GEs, which come out as hey, like goeiemorgen. It's hard to hold the spit for a good duration. It's the wettest of all the languages.
It's like one of the wettest countries, and it's one of the wettest languages. So why would Eurovision be any different? So I think this is a key time to point out the Netherlands is actually one of the highest winning countries in Eurovision history. Ireland has the most wins with 7. Sweden, which basically created the popular music we listen to of the last 30 years, has 6. And then France, Luxembourg, the United Kingdom, and the Netherlands have 5 wins each. So how Luxembourg snuck in there?
And on a technicality, in 1969, when there were 4 winners tied and it was a shame because the clear winner that year should have been Spain. But yeah, Netherlands and I think Luxembourg snuck in to the top 5, whatever, because of that one weird year.
So I think that this is a good time to play Greg's choice for worst Eurovision winner. You want to introduce it, Greg?
Turkey in 2003. A song that is called Every Way That I Can. And I was watching, I remember, with my wife, who is Dutch. And our daughter must have been just 2 years old at that point. Probably would have gone to bed. I think we were watching with some family and just couldn't believe that this awful, annoying song did so well. And then, in fact, won the whole thing.
A travesty, a national and international travesty, an incident. And then,
now, we talked about the different categories of Eurovision song, and I'll let the listener decide which category this song falls into.
Yeah, why don't we play the song and then we'll identify the ridiculous Eurovision tropes that it embodies.
Yes.
So there we have the faux ethnic dance music. And by the way, a lot of Eurovision songs are designed so that the native folk dance of the nation can be performed to it. And this is no exception.
In the background, they're doing that. Meanwhile, she is singing in English. And it's Britney-esque.
Another trope is there are certain performers that just provide a template. Fake Shakira is like the default. Wow.
So there's a dance break.
So this is, again, very fake Shakira. Right?
Yes. And then the lyrics, at some point, it's, there are songs about female empowerment. There are songs about empowerment of any kind of minority. This song is very much not that.
No.
She's going to win back this master of the patriarchy every way that she can to throw herself at his feet. And the way that she says, I'll try, I'll die, I'll cry to make you love me again. And yeah.
I think what's interesting.
Section.
Oh yeah, there's a rap. Little Kim is not running scared.
Oh yeah.
Nothing in the world that could stop me, no sir. Nothing in the world that could stop me, no sir.
That's right. Repeat the same phrase 10 times.
Yeah.
Also, the break. Every Eurodance song has this. So there's also an interesting thing.
I'll give you all my love affair?
I'll give you all my love affair is the line. And I think another interesting thing is you have very talented singers that don't know what they're singing. So their emphasis, they'll do like a crazy, like Whitney Houston, and it's on the completely wrong line, the wrong song, the wrong syllable.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. What just epitomizes Eurovision mediocrity there?
You mentioned the ringer as a category, and you'd think that there's a fake ringer on that song. I think there's someone who's like, oh yes, I have been a songwriter for Britney and Shakira and and for Spice Girls. And they were like, oh yes, tell us the secrets of the best song. And it's just
it's like every ingredient in one.
Yeah, and yet it is none of them in the end. And a little bit of like folk ballad, ethnic, and dancing in the background as well. So this is the classic example of a Eurovision entry that all of the cognoscenti of Eurovision look at and they say, try again next year. Thanks for playing. Good of you to show up. At this is an entry level.
But then it won.
Entry. And then it won, and that should not have happened.
Again, the triumph of mediocrity and bad English speaking is a killer combination.
That's where we're biased.
And what's funny,
we're native English speakers.
Well, I mean, we're not trying to do Der Kommissar. I mean, you don't see like American pop singers being like, to really break, I'm going to sing in German. I think we're really going to smash it. So it's always the English. And again, I think that's sort of those. I mean, I almost want the winner to be in the native language. You know what I mean?
Yeah. France will do that. Spain, Portugal. Yeah.
It's a little.
And win.
And the reason that is again, another sort of Eurovision trope is like, you're like, a lot of the winners, a lot of the songs in Eurovision are like this kind of alternate dimension version of a pop song you might have heard in America 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's been sort of like in Eastern European labs, they try to recreate the pop music DNA. Yes, we must put it in computer and see what comes out. Yes, the computer says it is perfect pop song, so we will sing this.
And then we'll make 2 of them.
Algorithms. You get these sort of weird songs written by committee. There's almost sort of like a metaphysics simulacra kind of Philip K. Dick. It's like a pop song that sounds like a pop song on the radio.
Yeah.
It's got big production, but it's never going to be on the fucking radio. No one's going to listen to that shit.
No, because it can only exist on the stage of the theatrics of Eurovision. It can't exist in the vacuum of not being able to see it.
Yeah.
You need the synergy of seeing it, the dancing, the lasers, the pyro, and then a halfway decent song that has been created by committee.
And it is amazing. We should take a moment to say, for anybody who's not living in Europe or hasn't experienced Eurovision, it's admittedly bizarre that every year there's a multinational contest to figure out the best pop song. Why are none of these songs heard on the radio anywhere outside?
Why are they not good if they're supposed to be the best pop songs ever?
Yeah, you'd think it would be a great method for determining what songs are categorically, objectively good. And yet...
and what's interesting, but what you get is you get a substandard version of whatever David Guetta song was big 2 years ago.
Yeah, right.
That is
You know what I mean? With some bazookies.
Yeah, right.
I think the reason that Eurovision is so popular because it's sports for people who think football is too violent. It's an opportunity to cheer a country that is not just athletics. And the fans of Eurovision are the most passionate. They're like footballers. They're intense. They have an over-the-top commitment to the attraction that is Eurovision. My wife and I have friends who live in Atlanta who fly to Europe, who went to Sweden for Eurovision to watch that. And he paid top dollar to do it, but it was the time of his life. The fans are so crazy supportive of it. It was, okay, so a couple of years back, I was walking by the Melkweg, and the Melkweg is one of Amsterdam's best concert venues. And there was a line a good 1,000 feet long, wrapped around the corner, waiting to get in. This was at 4 p.m. And I stopped one of the people and said, "What are you waiting for?" And they said, "We are waiting for the semi-final simulcast of Eurovision." The doors weren't even opening for another 3 hours. The passion and commitment of the people, the Europeans, the Americans who get it, is unparalleled. It's the closest you can come are to sports fans. But the thing is, there's no violence in the sports. Yeah.
Rob, if you mentioned the comparisons to European sports and football, one of the mainstays of football is the injuries or the feigned injuries and trying to draw a penalty from the referee. I think that's a missed opportunity with Eurovision. And I'm not actually kidding, because some of these productions are so technologically ambitious, and with some of the pyrotechnics or whatever, and knowing how many times or how few times these acts get to perform on stage with a real run through, a real sound check, and with all the special effects, it's not as much as you might think. And some of these guys are kind of being, yanked up in the air. There are flames going on. They're sometimes putting their lives in jeopardy. And if you see in the movie Eurovision, you'll get to see Will Ferrell, Rachel McAdams. There's your sound check. You get 5 minutes. Oh, we're not really ready. And you're done. But there's no but. You're done. That.
And it's miraculous that there aren't more technical gaffes within Eurovision. It's the thing is, though, when each country performs, they go from one semifinal to another semifinal to another semifinal, and they don't change the routine. They practice a year in advance for this. And to get to where they are, they don't make mistakes.
There's also... for contestants, Eurovision is a 2-day affair. So the day before the broadcast, they perform for the judges, and they do the exact same show that the entire world sees in an empty arena. And then the judges, who are all called from the music business of their respective countries. And so the judges put in their votes on Friday, and then the world votes on the actual performance Saturday night. And so, so we're actually getting to an interesting point naturally, which is so great when that happens to you in the Dick Cavett sense of the term. Listeners have no fucking idea who Dick Cavett is. Google it. What constitutes a bad Eurovision song and a good Eurovision song? And what I've discovered in my profound research, it's a fine line between what's a good Eurovision song and what's a bad Eurovision song. Conversely, again, we're talking about a lot of what's terrible about Eurovision. And we actually have to point out, like, I think everybody in this conversation has a lot of affection for Eurovision. We're kind of hating on it, but you'd kind of miss it if it was gone. and you kind of do learn about the world from watching it. So, in other words, the worst Eurovision songs are often the most memorable.
That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the most well-remembered Eurovision song, Waterloo from ABBA. Their entry into Eurovision was Waterloo. That was their first foray into pop music. That's the only Eurovision song that I could sing for you. All of the other ones I do not remember.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, Waterloo is an amazing song. Like, I never understood the lyrics as a kid. It's really a crazy song, but great. Brilliant. I mean, it's
so over the top.
And it's in English. And
And in English.
So what's interesting is Rob just said he cannot remember or sing any other Eurovision hit other than Waterloo. And so I went through and I was like, what are the good Eurovision songs? Okay, I would argue that Euphoria by Loreen from Sweden, which was the 2012 winner, I think that's a good song.
I've heard that on the radio, and it works.
By the way, some Eurovision songs become regional and European hits, but they don't have a lot of cultural last to them, if that makes any sense. They're even almost more ephemeral than a regular top 40 song. But Euphoria is it's an amazing performance. I don't know if you remember it. Euphoria! And it's a Moroccan Swedish woman. So it sort of gives you a look at multicultural Sweden, which is usually in denial of its multiculturalism. She kills it. Her performance is amazing. The hook is amazing. And the production is it's like so technologically assured, and it's almost like this kind of like Bjork tech performance. It's like the perfect Eurodance song. I mean, you got to give it up for it.
Right.
Totes.
Yeah.
Conchita Wurst, Rise Like a Phoenix,
Yeah.
I think is a fantastic song. You know, it
with the orchestral section, the strings and everything, it's so
very empowering.
It's
like brave too.
It's like Gloria Gaynor does a Bond theme.
Ooh,
that's a great,
nice, Matt.
Yeah, great pairing.
Love Shine a Light by Katrina and the Waves is pretty good.
Yep.
I mean, it's not Walking on Sunshine, but for a big song on the continent, it kind of does the business. What do you think?
That was the UK's last decent entry. What was that? 1997,
and it was in Ireland during the end of the Troubles.
Yes. Ireland in Eurovision is just a fascinating thing. Period. Speaking of Ireland, another great one. I mean, this one is incredible. I don't know how to pronounce this name.
Oh boy.
The song is In Your Eyes. It was the winner in 1993.
Niamh.
Okay, so it was Niamh Kavanagh. And I'd say she's one of the greatest singers I've ever heard in my life. She's Whitney. She's Celine. I mean, it is one of the greatest vocal performances I've ever seen.
And you've never heard it on the radio.
Oh, this is an interesting one. Brotherhood of Man is a British group, and they won in 1976 for Save Your Kisses for Me. I believe Brotherhood of Man had a couple other hits in England, in the UK.
Yeah.
But what I learned listening to Save Your Kisses for Me again, it's not a good song, but Susie and the Banshees totally stole it for Kiss Them For Me. So it's literally, and I was like,
is that right?
So it's like 1970, let's see, what's the year here? Hold on. So, yeah, Save Your Kisses for Me came out in 1976. Susie,
bye bye, baby, bye bye.
Susie definitely heard it and bogarted it 10 years later or whatever, because Kiss Them For Me came out. Take Me to Your Heaven by Charlotte Nilsson is a pretty good Waterloo homage. It's not bad.
Sweden.
I think Arcade by Duncan Lawrence, Your Netherlands Homie. It's kind of like a really good Maroon 5 song. You know what I mean? It lodges in the brain.
Oh, yeah.
You know? It's like a payphone. You know what I mean? It's like arcade, payphone, arcade. You know, what's an archaic weird thing from our past that we can reference that doesn't really exist anymore? Heroes by Mon Zamaro is a pretty good David Guetta ripoff.
I love that song.
Yeah, I think it's good.
Matt Deal, can I take a moment? I just realized you asked about voting earlier and about the announcement of the scoring. For years and years, Eurovision was only the country by country jury,
right?
Like music professionals or industry professionals, and only recently they added a public voting line into the winning calculations. With the prevalence of Blank's Got Talent or the X Factor or whatever, and phone in now for your favorite entry. The lines are closing. And in the case of the Netherlands in 2019, Sweden was the winner up until the public vote was factored in. And then the result did flip.
The drama continues.
It's Eurovision. It's all about the drama.
Oh, yeah. So I think now we should segue to sort of my choice for worst Eurovision song, which is also probably my favorite Eurovision song. So
I know exactly
I've seen these guys
going.
live. They bring it.
Oh my God. Okay. So 2006, the Finnish rock group Lordi, spelled Lordi, performed their song Rock and Roll Hallelujah.
Yeah.
I cannot stress enough. If you were going to pause the podcast and watch the video of the performance, this is the one to do it. This is the groundbreaker. This, to me, there's no way you can say it's a good song. Technically, it's a bad song, but it may be one of the greatest songs ever recorded, and maybe one of the greatest performances ever recorded. So, I guess without further ado, let's kick it to Hard Rock Hallelujah by Lordi. Hard rock. Sing along, everybody.
Hard rock hallelujah.
So it's like the Muppets animal voice.
The saints are crippled on this sinners' night. Lost are the lambs with no guiding light.
It's like Rob Zombie.
Yeah, with a slight Finnish accent, or not so slight.
With a Nordic tint.
It's also kind of reminds me of like Wasp, Fuck Like a Beast with no sex.
Hard Rock Hallelujah.
Oh, that part is stolen from Poison by Alice Cooper.
Oh yeah.
This sounds a lot like it. Yeah.
Stealing from other big hits is another Eurovision tradition, of course.
The true believers, thou shalt be saved. Brothers and sisters, keep strong in the faith.
His Nordic enunciation of English is so overpowering.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So he's talked about the fatherland, the new king. I mean, it's kind of disturbing that this is not an anthem.
George R.R. Martin had not... This inspired Game of Thrones, the people of the North.
Rock and roll angels, bring that hard rock hallelujah.
So he says rock and roll angels, and at this point his wings come out.
In slow motion. It takes about 15 seconds to fully extend his wings.
This is, by the way, when you watch it, it's one of the greatest editing achievements of Eurovision, this song.
I just love the female backup singer.
Oh, yes.
On the keyboards.
Oh, the burn victim? Yeah.
She's so happy, though.
She's a happy zombie, rock and roll zombie.
Slipknot, beget Lordy, beget Ghost. That's the line.
Hallelujah. Hard rock. Hallelujah. Hard rock. Hallelujah. Hard rock. Yeah. Rock and roll angels. Swing on hard rock. Hallelujah.
I mean, I'm speechless. It's so good.
This song sucks ass so hard, but it rocks so hard.
It comes to the other side. It's like, it's a little...
Would I buy their album? No fucking way. Would I buy a ticket to see them? I have and I will again.
Where did you see them live, Rob?
I saw Lordy perform in 2012, so they were still touring at this point, in the suburb of Amsterdam known as Amstelveen. They were full makeup, full prosthetics. Wow. Some pyro. If you look closely on their guitars in the Eurovision segment, you can see that they had pyro capability, but they were not triggered. Each of their guitars could, like Ace Frehley, shoot sparks and fire.
So obviously we're in an audio medium. How would you describe the spectacle to your grandmother that has terrible cataracts?
Imagine Halloween, and you want to dress like the God of Thunder, and you have a large budget to buy rubber and prosthetics. Everybody's face looks ghoulish, zombie-esque, necrotic almost. Contact lenses that are make your eyes look dead. Scars, beards, horns embedded in your forehead. A lot of leathers and cod pieces and guitars, your axes, shaped like axes. So it's really Kiss and Gwar put together in a Nordic fashion. They wouldn't be so surprised if they were to show up on the doorstep of a church in Sweden.
I mean, the visual is so insane. It's essentially Slipknot meets Motley Crue in Burning Man as dressed by the Wildings in Game of Thrones.
There you go. Yeah, the Wildlings. Yeah.
That's it.
I think it's a good song because it actually takes the elements of every kind of bad song and puts it in. It's like hair metal, Bon Jovi, Skid Row, Wasp, Gwar. In other words, it's so extreme and so banal at the same time. I mean, it's like art. It's almost avant-garde.
Yeah.
It was avant-garde because it was such a departure from every other pop song Eurovision hosted. This was the first metal song that achieved this status of Eurovision winner. Now, other competitors they're not going in the vein of heavy metal. They're going more towards Nine Inch Nails, gothic emo, a little darker, not as operatic in its expanse.
So we should probably end up here. We end usually by sort of talking about the critical take on the subject. And so I found this from The Independent. Eurovision can also be viewed as a kind of cultural history of our evolving and sometimes dubious musical tastes. If you thought Brexit was a disaster, let this be your reminder that European votes have been throwing up some very questionable results for more than half a century. What do you say?
I gotta say, there is a place for quinoa and there's a place for red vines. Eurovision is the red vines.
But before we end, the first post-pandemic, they canceled Eurovision last year. What's the vibe on the streets of Amsterdam for Eurovision 2021?
Tickets are hard to come by to get to the Ahoy in Rotterdam where it's being held. They have not released how many people will be actually in attendance just yet. People are excited. It's a little muted because of the pandemic, but it's a bright ray of sunshine in an otherwise crappy 2020-21. You can't keep a good country down.
So who is the contestant? Do you know? Do you know who the Dutch contestant is, or has that been a closely held secret?
It's the same guy who was singing the song for the Netherlands last year, 2020, and he had an entry which he then scrapped to write a new entry for this second time around, Eurovision 2021.
Django McRoy?
Sorry, I'm going to look up his name right now because I can't say it properly if I'm not careful. He's representing the Surinamese culture, former colonial, Surinamese culture in the Netherlands. His name is Django McRoy. His entry for this year, the new song that he wrote, for this 2021 Eurovision, is, I think, even more callback phrase of "broko me," which is more like Surinamese patois, which is from like the slave times. You will not break me, and I think it's playing up, the sentiment of Black Lives Matter, of that is very much. I think there's still protests going on in Rotterdam. So, I think there's some buzz, for sure.
Holland is a very multicultural country. And it has its own sort of currents in that area that it needs to face. It is facing. It doesn't have a choice but to face. And so I think that's kind of interesting that I think in other words, it shows that Eurovision is a way to sort of take the temperature of that kind of stuff. That cultural, what's happening in the culture. So on that note, I think we should end. But in 2021, Eurovision will rise like a phoenix.
That's true.
Okay. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Disinfect was created by Morris Bernstein and Matt Deal. Produced by Sean Lewis and Esther Yoon. Theme music by Jeremy Clark, aka Mr. 66. Artwork by Bill McMullen, aka Millions Make Millions. If you want to tell us how much you love or hate, disinfect, or wish to purchase an extremely overpriced commemorative mug, oven mitt, or t-shirt, please find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and disinfectpodcast.com. You can also contact us at info@disinfectpodcast.com. Please like, subscribe, donate, all that shit. Thank you, and see you next episode to disinfect more of music's worst songs, wherever fine podcasts are shilled. Copyright Giant Step 2020 and whatever other necessary boilerplate legal mumbo jumbo blah 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 you hear at the end of your favorite podcasts.